Airship, sir?" Major Wellington gave the officer who sat in front of his desk a pointed look, one that spoke of some slight annoyance at the question. "Yes, coined by a newspaper writer. Seems to have stuck." Lieutenant Michael Valiantine looked down at the dress hat he held in his hands and back up at the major. He said nothing, unsure of what he could say about it all. "This," Wellington said, tapping a file that lay on his desk, "says you've been prone to speak your mind at times. Well, speak it, man." Valiantine had been away from the service almost a full year, and everything around him seemed odd. Nothing looked familiar, though he couldn't see how that much could have changed in a relatively short span of time to afford him such disquiet. The major in particular came off as a different sort of man, though he hadn't been Valiantine's direct superior before the lieutenant had been wounded in order to convalesce for an indeterminate period after his release from the Army hospital. Wellington's office looked rearranged, a status that nudged the lieutenant into the uncomfortable position of desiring nothing more than to march around and set it back to right. Instead, Valiantine reached up and opened another file the major had set at the edge of his desk for him to peruse. Inside it lay several sheets of paper, all of them choked with reports of airships. "I'll go over it again, Valiantine. They tell me you're fit for duty, so I expect you to listen and get a firm handle on the situation." Wellington leaned forward in his chair, took a cheroot from a wooden box, and lit it from an ornate lighter he was using as a paperweight. Valiantine hadn't known the man to smoke before. "First sighted in California last year," the major said around puffs on a stick. "Several reports in the local papers. Big things, some of them moving at a rapid pace, others just floating there in midair." The man paused. Valiantine wondered if his own reactions were being gauged by Wellington. He felt suddenly very self-conscious of his new mustache and his over-regulation-length hair, both grown during his off-time. "Unlike anything anybody had ever seen before," the major continued, "and able to move at a speed that staggered the imagination, and no two of these things described alike in their physical makeup." Then they started moving eastward. Valiantine turned one report over to glance at the next. He spied the word Nebraska there. "Seem to be following the rail lines," the major said, puffing away, "or at least that's what some genius somewhere deduced. Can't nod to the validity of that. Anyway, these airships started appearing over Wyoming, Nebraska, Illinois. Latest reports were only just last month, right up to the Illinois-Indiana line. Then, nothing." The lieutenant looked up at Wellington. "Flocks of birds? Eagles? No, absolutely not." "Cloud formations? At night? Look at the damn reports, Valiantine." "Then if there's anything to this, someone's made some advances, certainly." The major praised him with half-open eyes. "Yes, but who and how?" Valiantine's head swam. He hadn't expected to return to anything like this. In the service since he was 18, he'd been on detached special duty for almost 10 years, operating out of the War Department building in Washington, D.C., and going where he was needed, doing what he was ordered to do. During his convalescence at Virginia Beach, on the ocean, something substantial had occurred. He'd met a woman and began to question thoughts of returning to active duty. The woman. No, that was unfair. She was Eileen, but Valiantine had joked with her that no name could ever do her pretty features justice. She, in turn, quoted Shakespeare, telling him there was no thought of pleasing him when she was christened. From that moment on, he was decidedly smitten with the woman. Yet their flirtation did not exactly extend to love, though, and thoughts of his career began to weigh heavily upon him. Finally, he had made his decision. Eileen had failed to comprehend his instinctual desire to return to the surface. Truth be told, he didn't fully understand it himself. Despite the rare happiness he'd experienced with her, something pulled him back, an intangible compulsion that ultimately drove a wedge between him and a woman with whom he thought he might be able to spend the rest of his life. Instead, he returned, unsure of what exactly he thought he was doing and why. Valiantine had been wounded when a cannon had exploded near him on a test range in New York, pitting one whole side of him with shrapnel. The doctor said he'd been lucky not to have taken any to the head, but deep inside he felt as if he had. His once clear thoughts were no longer as sharp as before his accident. Though his body had healed, the lieutenant doubted he was entirely rested. He often awoke to the sound of the exploding cannon ringing in his brain. On his first day back on duty, he was called into Major Wellington's office, a man he never much liked, and told what on the surface seemed to be a fairy story.